You're listening to Foxx on the Wire. Let's get into it. Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 88 of Foxx on the Wire. We have a very, very special guest today. We have Tony Jack The Bear Mantz. Have I pronounced that surname correctly, Tony?
Perfectly.
Beautiful. Well, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. And 88 is actually a good number because, if I'm not mistaken, within Chinese culture, 8 is a number that you'll find that lots of Chinese people will take as many 8s as possible, either in their phone on the mobile numbers, personalised number plates. And I don't exactly know what it is, but if I was going to have a guess, I think it may have something to do with the fact that it looks like infinity, just a vertical infinity. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about Chinese numerology.
I think I have heard something about that, but I guess there's lots of, whether you want to call it sort of superstitions or little things that are probably centuries old, that's quite fascinating. So you're the owner and founder of Jack The Bear's Deluxe Mastering. Can you...
I'm guilty of that.
Yes. Can you tell us what is mastering? For those people out there listening, you know, you've got obviously recording engineers, producers, but then there's that final phase of the process, which is mastering. How would you sum it up?
All right, so I guess in the most layman terms, I would describe it as a process where I'm taking a stereo mix and I'm putting it through some equipment, equalizers, compressors predominantly, in order to try and get the sound to be more balanced, to just make it sound better overall and more finished. But equally as importantly, apart from that, it's about getting the final master to a point where it will translate well. And what that means is it should sound good no matter where you play it. So whether it comes through one of these, in a club system, in the car, on the radio, it should sound pretty consistent. It shouldn't be a case of sounds great in the car, but when I put it in my earbuds, sounds like rubbish. So that's the other important criteria that you need to achieve. So that's basically what it is in a nutshell. So, you know, I think a lot of people are familiar with a bass and treble control on a stereo rig. Well, I kind of tweak a more sophisticated bass and treble controller and some dynamic controllers to get it sounding good. And that's pretty much the gist of it. And they're ultimately to facilitate a process to help the artist realize their vision. So they're gonna have some idea as to how they want it to be, and I need to be able to hear it and go, I can see where this is heading. I can see what they're trying to accomplish here, to make that happen for them.
Yep. So, I mean, this could be more so part of the mixing process, but you often hear musicians say, you know, they'll take a bounce of the song and listen to it in their car, which I'm guilty of as well, because they're most familiar with their car speakers. But yeah, like your process is trying to get all those tracks and all that sound coming out of whatever speaker or speakers people are listening to. Have you found that a lot with musicians, that the car is the place that they will go to rely on what they're hearing?
The car or anything that they're used to. Even myself, Craig, I've been in my current studio for 18 years now. And while I like to think I know it really, really well, I find something very reassuring about playing a file or CD in the car. It's just a factory fitted, normal, nothing special. Even at home, contrary to what people might think, I don't have some whiz-bang stereo at home. I just play it through a pair of computer speakers, really. I mean, there's a subwoofer with them, but it's very, very humble. And those things just give me the real world reference. And everyone's got it, you know. I mean, people think about cars because they spend time in their cars, but it doesn't have to be a car. What the reference for a client is going to be that one source that they listen to most of their music on, whatever it is. And because that's where their frame of reference is, and that's when they know straight away whether something is sitting well or not.
Yep. Yeah, because I guess you sit in the studio and you crank it up on those beautiful monitors, and pretty much anything sounds good out of those, or a nice pair of headphones. But
You'd think so, but in the context of the job I do, what I rely on is having speakers that you don't want anything that's flattering. You want things that are honest. So if something sounds good, they'll come out good.
Mm-hmm.
If something sounds like rubbish, then it's going to sound like rubbish. So you don't want anything that's going to be flattering or altering the sound in a way that is there to impress you.
Yep.
They have to make you work hard. So, because again, if they're honest and they come out sounding good, then it'll be fine. It'll be good.
And what's the idea behind the remastering process? Because I saw recently you were remastering the 20th anniversary of one of my favourite albums, not only favourite Aussie albums, but just favourite albums ever, was Sunk Lodo's Between Birth and Death album, which I was just obsessed with back in the day. Glad to see they're releasing some new music again too. What's the idea behind the remastering of, say, something like that after 20 years?
So remastering really is more of a marketing thing from record labels more than anything. It's an opportunity for a label to reinvigorate a band's, could be a career or just could be a release. Really, it's about money. Now, the way records sounded 20, 25 years ago are quite different to the way they sound now. So the labels that really care from that respect will go, okay, we're going to try and freshen up the sound of this record. And so the remastering is an opportunity to do that. But really, the main reason they're going to do it is because they see an opportunity to make money. Or, as I said, a band may decide they want to have a reunion. You know, we're seeing more and more of these things happen, and particularly with, you know, that fan base from 25 years ago who were younger into music, now a little bit older. So it's more about nostalgia than anything else, and reconnecting to their youth. And
guilty.
And more than likely they will have, that generation will probably be a little bit more financially flush than what they were 20, 25 years ago too. So there's a method to the madness. These things aren't done purely for altruistic reasons, you know.
Yeah, so
I'm grateful that they do, because it's more work for me.
Yeah, well, an album like that too, I don't know, when it came out in 2003, I think it was, from memory, I don't think it would have been released on vinyl back then, just CD,
No.
but now it's being re-released on vinyl. Is that a different process from your point of view as mastering the album? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So mastering vinyl is a different animal. There are a few different things that you need to take into consideration because of the format to where it's going. And I won't get too I'm going to assume that your audience aren't an overly technical audience, so I'm not going to bore you with all of the geeky stuff. But when you're doing things in the digital world, it's just a matter of ones and zeros. There aren't really that many consequences. But in the analog world, the way you push a record or push a frequency is going to have some consequences as to when it gets transferred to the lacquer to manufacture the vinyl. So there are these limitations that you have to take into consideration. And that's probably the simplest way of trying to explain it. And it's the only time that I will approach mastering anything slightly differently to anything else. there are people that will say, I do a special kind of master for the radio, or I do a special master for downloads or for digital or for Spotify. Now, you might talk to another engineer and they will bring out their AES white paper and their graphs and all that kind of stuff. Personally, I don't believe there really is any difference, because, again, if we go back to what we initially started our conversation with, it's about translation. So it doesn't really matter whether it's going to be played on Spotify or whether it's going to be on a CD or whether it's going to be on a high-res streaming channel, full bandwidth. It's got to sound good. It just has to sound good. Vinyl, in my opinion, the only exception and variation and time when I will take a slightly different approach to the process.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I saw that, and I'm like, yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite albums back in the day, and sort of around that time as well. Like I was in bands, and you were the go-to guy for getting your tracks mastered. And you probably still are. I just haven't released anything sort of heavy in a few years. So
no. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you to say that, but I don't know whether I'm the go-to guy. Look, I've been very fortunate and privileged that I've built a good client base and I've had a great career. I'm amazed that I still have any kind of relevance in the scheme of things, because things have changed a lot. And with the advent of more technology, cheaper technology, more people now having the ability to do their own mastering and do it really well, for that matter. And so, and also now with AI and some very, very cheap options out there, and with the record industry being what it is, and budgets are pretty much non-existent, and musicians now are forced to be pretty much everything. They're the artist, they're the writer, they're the producer, the mixer, the master engineer, the graphic artist, the social media guy. They're just doing everything. So now people really have to be either very, very committed to their art form to actually seek the services of someone externally, or somehow just have a wad of cash lying around that they're happy to spend because they care enough to do it, right? So I'm fortunate that I have enough clients and enough experience, I guess, but even so, that doesn't mean that I've been able to just sit back and ride on the coattails of things that I've done and expecting that people are just going to come. If anything, it's harder. And while having a track record and a reputation is great and is helpful, but ultimately the bottom line is this to a client that'll come to me, particularly if they're young and they're new, and that is, what can you do for me? What can I get for whatever I can afford to pony up? Right? And all the other stuff is great, but it doesn't, I don't think, necessarily factor in. They may help a little bit, but they're not ultimately the thing that's going to get it across the line. What's going to get across the line, Craig, is them feeling like, I care about their music, I'm invested, I want to really help them out, and I'm showing them that I'm wanting to work with them. That's what matters more than anything else. And again, it's not rocket science. You got to put yourself in the shoes of the client and just think, well, if I was them, what would I reasonably expect? Like, what would I like to hear? What sort of interaction would I like to be involved in? What would I like to see before I start throwing money at something? And it all comes down to the value that you bring, and value is perceived. Everyone's, there are some people that will pay $200 to get one song done, and they see the value in it. And there's other people that will say, there's no way, I don't care who it is or what it is. There's no way in the world I can see. But that same person will go, and buy drugs for $200 or a whole heap of alcohol, 3 bottles of whiskey or whatever. So again, everyone's got a different take and perspective on what they value.
Well, I think you kind of touched on something I wanted to bring up with you. Because obviously we're friends on social media, and I follow you, and you're very open and about your journey and everything. And I think it was fairly recently you put up a reel about the relationship economy. So I think you sort of touched on it in your answer there. You've already kind of explained it a little bit, but do you want to go into that a little bit deeper? What you mean by a relationship economy, and do a lot of musicians sort of realize that we are in that relationship economy?
I think people realize it, subconsciously somehow. But one thing that really helped me a lot was this, and this doesn't just apply to musicians and the industry. I mean, we can talk about it in that context, but I think this kind of applies quite broadly. So,
Yep.
So I'm a great believer that the quality of our life is dependent a lot on the quality of relationships that you're in, and your ability to be able to create these relationships and foster them and nurture them and look after them. And as I've said many times before, we are in a relationship economy, and the currency of the economy is trust. And trust is something that you earn. Now, how do you earn trust? It comes from you being engaged with people, by being someone who's there to provide something, not just take something, because most of the time people go into situations or friendships, relationships, looking at, well, how can I leverage something? How can I get something? How can I use this particular situation, rather than what can I bring?
Yeah.
What can I offer? What problems can I solve? How can I actually contribute? Because it's when you come from that perspective and that attitude that you're going to earn trust. And again, just put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Someone comes to you, and most of us can pick up on these sort of things, Craig. We can tell, we can sense when someone's here and being nice to us for, because they want something, or they've heard something about us, and all of a sudden now, they want to pick our brains, or they want us to do something for them, or do them a favor, whatever, as opposed to someone that's actually sincerely coming, wanting to help, finding out that, I hear that you're having some trouble with your just. I'll give you a real world example, right? So there was this kid who was a young engineer. He was studying at an audio school, and so obviously he was wanting to find a way to get some kind of experience or interning. But what he did, rather than ring up and just say, hey, have you got any positions, or can I come in and shadow you? He was actually quite smart about it. He saw something online that I posted that I was having some issues with one of my Macs. He hits me up and says, hey, I saw this post. I'm actually really good at computers. Can I come down and help you see if I can sort out this issue for you? Didn't once even bring up anything about. So straight away, this kid had come with potentially with a solution to a problem that I needed fixing. So he brought value to me. He came to bring something, to contribute something. Now, in the process of doing that, guess what? He had sown the seeds of potentially creating this relationship. And so what do you know? We're sitting there, he's fixing my computer, we're talking, and the walls are coming down from my end. I'm realizing, okay, this kid, while potentially he might be wanting something, but he wasn't there for that. He didn't expressly come with that. And we just started chatting about stuff. And so when the time came for him to ask, it was easier for me to say, you know what, dude, you're good. Yeah, I'm more than willing now to at least entertain that thought. But again, building that relationship. And that could go with any particular context. So
yep.
when we can become really good at building relationships with people, and based on the premise that we want to be engaged with these people primarily because we want to bring something to them, then that is going to take you a hell of a lot further than approaching it from the aspect of what can I get, how can I leverage it, and have an agenda, which most people can see anyhow. So, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. You can try, but you're not going to get very far with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely a relevant thing, in any scenario, large or small, or no matter what sort of sector of our lives or whatever. It's give and take, and we've got to look after each other and help each other out. And I think
finish what you were going to say, Craig. I'm sorry.
I think you can pick up on sort of who is genuine in that way, and who is just after something from you rather than the give and take. So
yeah, look, authenticity is binary, and really it's that authenticity that is going to be the ingredient to build the trust. So absolutely.
You were going to go on to say something?
I was, and you know what? Now I lost. I think it was about the authenticity, but maybe no. That's okay. What's that thing that they say, or the meme or the saying? Where two types of people: those who listen and those who wait for their turn to speak, or something like that.
Oh, right. So, yep.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, sort of when and how did you get into the music industry?
Yeah, well, I guess like most of us who are in the industry, I always had a love of music ever since I was a child. And probably when I was 15, I made the decision that I wanted to make a career in music. I didn't exactly know. Well, actually, no, I did. At the time, I wanted to be a producer,
right,
and a mixing engineer, because I, like a lot of my, people in my vintage, collected records, listened to vinyl, would look at the liner notes, saw these, got familiar with what I was reading, and I was fascinated with the way records are made, especially listening to it in headphones. Stereo always fascinated me. And I thought, I want to be a producer and a mix engineer, because they were pretty much the only people that were accredited. And so really from 15, I just had to be in my bonnet. Right, I'm going to get involved in the music industry. I want to be a producer and engineer. But the mastering I tell people that mastering found me. I didn't know what mastering was. I mean, it was hardly you ever saw credits on old records. I think from memory, the only time I remember seeing a mastering credit was for a Sammy Hagar record. And it was old, it was Wally Trigo, God rest his soul, from Capitol Records. It's the only time I can remember, way back in the day, of seeing a mastering credit. So I had no idea what it was either. And I fell into it. And it was a very fortuitous and serendipitous thing that I came across it very, very early. So, yeah.
So
all downhill.
Did you ever play an instrument? Like, did you want to be an actual musician, or were you more from the production mastering side of things?
Okay, so in high school, back in the day, what was called Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4. So for about 4 years as a young adolescent, I got into playing guitar, and actually I wasn't too bad at it. I mean, proficient, but I wouldn't say band ready. And I never had aspirations to be in a band or perform live or do anything like that. So the desire to get into, it was more about getting involved behind the scenes. That had more appeal to me than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't really played guitar since then, even though I have a guitar collection, which I'm selling at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you selling all that? Like, you got an eBay store, or just on
Marketplace
and that sort of thing?
I'm selling them. Look, I put it up online. I did sell one. It was a 74 all original gold top. I got another 9 guitars, so they're all collectible. They're all over 50 years old now.
Wow.
Most of them are 74, so I thought good time to sell them now that they've hit that 50-year anniversary. But just standard, some Les Pauls, a Stratocaster, a P-Bass. There's a couple of unusual ones there too, 76 Fender Starcaster, although I will hang on to that one and wait a few years for it to get to 50. The 68 Gibson Melody Maker SG, 63 pre-CBS Fender Jag. So yeah, there's some really nice pieces there. But they're just not getting the love they deserve. So it's time for me to sell them and get them off to good homes. So no eBay, no marketplace. Look, I just put it up online and word of mouth. They're not the sort of things that you'll just flip, and it's not like I'm not desperate to sell them. If I don't end up selling them, that's fine.
Yeah,
they'll hold value and they'll be fine. And if something happens to me inadvertently, then my kids can punch on over it. That can be their problem.
You just want to make sure they go to a good home, a worthy home where they'll be shown some love and hopefully played.
Sure.
Yeah.
Preferably, hopefully played. But look, if someone else is just a collector, not a player, well, I'm not going to sneeze at them if they come up with the right amount of cash that I'm looking for.
So what sort of music did you grow up listening to? Like just as a listener, and do you still listen to all that stuff?
Okay, so most of the musical diet just came from what was on the radio at the time. In terms of anything external to that, as a very, very youngster growing up at home, my dad, he was quite a collector of hi-fi. And in particular, he liked reel-to-reel machines. He was really into those. He had a mate who was a merchant seaman and used to go to Singapore and Hong Kong a lot. And, back in that time, Australia was really quite behind in terms of what was available. And so he'd bring stuff from overseas that wasn't available in Australia and probably wasn't going to come here for a long time. So it was all the whiz bang latest and greatest. So coming from Asia, it came with tapes that were bootlegs, and so there was all kinds of stuff that he just whatever he got. But I remember threading these tapes on the machine, listening to. In fact, the first album that I remember listening to as a kid, I was 7, 8, was Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
Mm.
And now, when you're 7 or 8, you got no idea what that production is, but for whatever reason, listening to that record blew my mind. I can't understand why, but it just had an impact on me and just made me go, "Wow, this is amazing." But going back to try and answer your question, so my dad had things like the Beach Boys, Johnny Cash, Nat King Cole, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin. Even there was an interesting band from Holland called Focus Dutch Band. They're really amazing. So I got exposed to quite a bit of different music as a kid, and growing up, I again through my formative years as an adolescent got to hang around with older people. One of my neighbours who lived down the street from where I grew up, he had a few years on me, and he was a guy that had quite an eclectic taste in music. So I'd go over to his place. He was like my big brother, and so I'd be listening to what he was playing, and just got tremendous influence. And I found myself at being 15 years of age, being right into jazz fusion records. So it was all about your Stanley Clarke, Chick Corea, Return to Forever, Frank Zappa.
Mm-hmm.
Love Frank Zappa. Got right into him thanks to him. So I was fortunate. And that actually held me in really good stead to be a mastering engineer, because it pays to have an appreciation for a broad genre of music and have an understanding of how it should sound and how it should be, and to actually enjoy it too. So when you're working on it, you're actually into it, as opposed to I'm just in a rock and I don't really like this, I don't like that, but I'm just going to go through the motions. You really don't want that. You want to be engaged with the work that you do. So yeah, man, I was very fortunate in terms of the schooling I had and the exposure I had to a great variety of music.
Yeah, I think we owe a lot to our parents when we're growing up. I could say the same thing, surrounded by Beatles and Rolling Stones records and even John Farnham in my case, all that sort of stuff. So it's
I
sort
think
of a,
especially, yeah,
yeah, yep,
especially your lot, because you're obviously younger than me. I'm 61, so I'm at the tail end of the boomer generation. But my parents' generation were not they weren't really record collectors, and I think the popular culture back then wasn't like it was with your parents. So certainly you were very lucky. My dad didn't want me to get involved in music at all. He understood as a hobby, but not as a career choice.
yeah, yeah. I also wanted to talk to you about something aside from music. Following you on the socials, if you seeing some of your photos post up, I actually get quite hungry, when you post all your photos of meat and that sort of thing. So you're actually doing the carnivore diet, is that right?
Yeah, yep. Probably. Well, I'm not one for counting exactly, but yeah, I'm probably 18 months or so in now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, well, why did you start that and how? And yeah, because I actually thought it was just like a temporary thing that you might do, or someone might do. I didn't know it was a long-term thing, like an 18-month sort of ongoing thing.
Well, sorry. For me personally, it'll be something I'll be doing for the rest of my life. But
Right.
you're right. And people refer to it as an elimination diet. So the whole idea around it is people would go on a carnivore diet if they're experiencing health issues that are just resisting. They just can't get rid of. And often a lot of these things are due to inflammation. All right, which is really created from poor metabolic health. So what people will do will say, okay, well, go on this carnivore diet, which is actually an elimination diet, and eat nothing, or the Lion's diet, which is just red meat, water, salt. That's it.
Yeah.
And then see how you go. And if you want to start introducing things, then you'll kind of know, oh, what am I affected by? Am I affected by plants? Am I affected by fruits? Am I affected by nuts? Whatever that, by grains and whatnot. And so yeah, for some people, it's a temporary thing that they do to try and heal their gut, get their metabolic rate on an even keel. But I got into it out of curiosity because I've always had an interest in health. I used to be a morbidly obese bloke 13, 14 odd years ago. Got rid of that and always took a real interest in health and nutrition and tried different things over the years. And it was more out of curiosity. Initially, when I first came across it, I thought, my first initial thought was, that's weird. This is just a fad. This is just going to be one of those fads like the Israeli army diet or the potato diet or the 5-2 diet. All these things have sort of become trendy for a while, and then they disappear.
Yep.
But it didn't disappear. Things just kept coming my way. Now, at the time when I took it on, I wasn't in bad health. But there were some things that were going on for me, and namely, I had this persistent irritation on my skin, just in few little patches. My sleep wasn't all that great. Also, at the time, my testosterone levels were pretty low, according to my doctor.
Mm-hmm.
There was also just some brain fog. So, and I had some visceral fat that I was struggling to get rid of. So, so there were things going on and they were kind of sticking with me. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I've experimented with other things in the past. Let's just give this a go. The more I looked into it, the more evidence I saw that people were telling great stories about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's great for them, but let's just see how it works for me. And so I tried and I delved into it, and I just haven't looked back. So all the things that were going on for me disappeared.
Wow.
And I've been, in the best condition and shape. And again, there's two metrics I use. One, how I feel, and then the blood work to support it.
Yep.
And people will come and say, "Oh, where are the studies?" And we get people just get so caught up in the science and as if they're fucking experts and they're going to be able to tell us and disseminate information.
You're not a doctor.
Well, no, yeah, and this is why. And you probably notice that when I do post, I often put in the caveat of, "Look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. This has worked for me, and you may want to consider it." Right?
Yep.
So here I am. I feel fantastic on it. I have, and on the odd time when I've tried something, I give Father's Day, not this one, but the previous one. I remember being with my kids, and we got some food from one of my favorite Chinese roast barbecue joints, and we got some duck and some pork. And normally, in the past, I'd have a little bit of rice and some Chinese broccoli. And at that time, I'd been in it for 5 months or so. Didn't really think much of it. I thought, I'll give it a try. I had two forkfuls of this Chinese broccoli, and dude, for 2 days, I think the medical term is fucked.
Wow.
I was really not good. Now, other people may not have that kind of reaction, but it's interesting as I've gone on this journey and introduced things and realized, oh, okay, this doesn't work for me. I feel really good when I do this on this path. So if it ain't broke, but mate, best thing I've ever done for myself.
Wow. Yeah, I think I first heard of it listening to Joe Rogan. Might have been
same. That was the first.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson. Yeah, he was an early adopter,
or his daughter. It might have been his daughter actually. Yeah,
because she had some kind of horrendous rheumatoid arthritis, or anyway, some kind of shit that was really, really bugging her out. But as like I said, as I did my own research, the more I looked into it and the more anecdotal evidence I saw of people, it just made me go, okay, maybe there's a bit more to it. Let's give it a try.
Yeah, it sort of seems to, and it's different for everybody, of course, but it seems to clear up some of those ailments that people have. And yeah, she had quite a few from memory. But she was quite sick and had, I think it was an arthritis thing, and
yes, something like that. Yeah,
cleared her up.
But again, again, what's interesting, and again, I'm not talking here as a doctor or scientist, but the more I look into things just in my own interest, the more I'm realizing that the vast majority of diseases that we have in the West, in modernity, are as a result of inflammation, whether it's diabetes or cancer, dementia, you name it, arthritis, a lot. Now, yes, there's always going to be exceptions and people with particularly different or very rare conditions. I'm just speaking generally now, yeah? It's usually attributed to that. And the reason why people have poor metabolic health is because of processed grains, carbohydrates, sugar. They're the main culprits. And so I'm not saying that you have to be a strict carnivore to be healthy. I think ultimately, so long as you get rid of sugars, grains, or at least severely limit them, if you feel that there's no way known I can go and be that strict, those things are going to help you considerably. Yeah, because we've been conditioned, man. We've been conditioned to think that this is the way things are. And again, this is not conspiracy theory. Decades and decades ago, the grain and sugar industries, through being bought off, created the science, which then, somehow they made it work that, red meat's bad and this is good. And then that influenced policy with the politicians. It's amazing just how corrupt the system is. It really is. And
Yep.
it's always, money talks. And, just because we've been taught a certain way, it is the right way. And again, this is, the people that tell you to trust the science don't actually do what good science is, which always allows itself to be open to scrutiny. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, once your bias is towards a certain thing and the narrative suits the story, well, why do you want to move from that? Because it makes you feel good, right? It's a bit like religion in some respects.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, man. But look, again, I would say anyone that wants to improve the quality of their health would certainly be well served by just cutting out the junk food, the ultra processed food, really cutting back on the sugar and the grains, and keeping up good protein and fat in their diet, and they will experience some improvements. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Yeah, because a lot of the food we consume these days is just almost poison, and
Not almost. It is poison. It is poison.
It's making people very unhealthy, and I think more people are waking up to it. They're sort of spraying on the foods and all that stuff, and it's a very big rabbit hole. But I've noticed, in the last couple of years, especially, more people are coming out talking about it, and it's waking people up slowly but surely. But obviously, all this talk of like processed meats and eating the bugs and all that stuff isn't too, it doesn't seem too good. So.
Not appealing. It's not appealing to me.
It's not appealing at all. No, it's just crazy, actually. So what does a day-to-day thing look like for you? Like, is it the same thing you eat almost the same time every day, or you mix it up a bit?
Well, broadly speaking, it is, but there's plenty of scope for variety. So typically, my day starts. I get up before dawn, and I'll drink some water because I need to hydrate.
Yep.
And then I'll go for a walk, and I won't have my first. I'll have one. I'll have two coffees, but I always start the day with a coffee after my walk, and I usually wait an hour and a half, 2 hours afterwards, because it's just how it affects your adrenals. So it doesn't, it just helps with containing your adrenals, so you don't get the adrenal dump. So I'll have a bulletproof coffee, which is black coffee, which, grind, squeeze it out, unsalted butter, blend it up. I do have some raw cold pressed honey in there, so that's pretty much the only carb that I will allow myself, daily, and that'll usually see me through until 12 or 1 o'clock.
Wow.
And typically for me, it's eggs and bacon, or I'll make an omelette from whatever I had the night before, any leftovers the night before. So it's amazing. People think that it's boring, but it really isn't boring, man. If you go online, there's plenty of YouTube channels of people that will give you some really interesting recipes But what's interesting, though, is when your body becomes fat adapted, that you always love eating meat. You just always enjoy it. I don't get sick of it. It's not like I'm bored of this, I'm sick of this. I don't necessarily want to have the same steak every day. I'll switch it up with some mince. I'll have some. Also, it does incorporate seafood and dairy, but the seafood is more the small oily fish, so your sardines, mackerels, lots of shellfish and mollusks, so, canned oysters in brine, not in the horrible oil that they pack it in, because it's all that seed oils, and that's poison right there. So really, man, and you tend to eat less on it because you're eating more nutritionally dense food, which makes you feel fuller, you're more satiated, you're not as focused on food. So much of our culture is based around food, right? Celebrate with food, and nothing wrong with that. I enjoy food and I look forward to eating, but I'm not obsessed with it. It's not like, what am I going to eat tonight? It's easy. There's no mucking around with it, and I enjoy it, and I feel good, and I get on with my day. I'm not spending my day trying to, work out shopping lists and all this kind of stuff.
Now, does that include chicken as well? Like, are you mixing red
Yeah,
meat, chicken, and
chicken is a part of it. I don't
yeah,
really eat chicken these days. I've kind of gone off chicken only because I don't think it gives the same kind of fats that you get
mm,
in the lamb and the beef. Because it's people think it's just meat and protein, but fat's a big part of the diet. Getting the right amount of fat, right balance. For me, I work on a 70 to 70% protein, 30% fat ratio. But put it this way: if it's a choice between eating chicken, right, and a box of Nutri-Grain, I'll eat the chicken every day, even
mm,
if it's not as good as the red meat. So yeah, so chicken's there, pork is there. Again, I'm the only pork I really get into now is just bacon. Um, but again, if you've only got bacon to eat and bacon products, it's better than eating the other junk.
yeah.
You know? But anything from an animal basically counts as fair game.
I do want to touch on some other things, but
Mm-hmm.
was it hard to make the transition from whatever diet you were on prior to carnivore and then to go into carnivore? Like, did you make the switch straight away, and how did that affect you?
Yeah. So I didn't go. Okay, so with the benefit of hindsight, I would have done it the same way that my wife did, which is over a period of a couple of months. I switched into it over maybe 4 weeks. It wasn't quite enough. And what I experienced was some diarrhea. And that really was due to the fact, well, two things. One, that my gut was still trying to, adjust.
Yeah.
And the fact that I hadn't quite worked out the right amount of fat for my diet. So I was probably eating a little bit too much fat at that time. So my body hadn't quite got used to this, and all all the gut flora was still trying to, it was like, what's going on here? So it wasn't that hard, but I was very motivated to do it because I really wanted to try for myself. So I tell people who are interested and are genuinely interested, this is just not something you do for a couple of days, and it's not something I recommend you do. Just go both feet in. I would, again, like my wife did, she did a lot of research into it as well. So I would transition over a couple of months because it does take time for your body to get rid of a lot of the toxins that's built over the years and the oxalates from all the vegetables and whatnot. And then once you become fat adapted and you're comfortable with it, you'd want to stick it out for 6 months. You're going to start feeling benefits before then, but give it 6 months. And I'd also suggest that people do a set of bloods before they begin to set a baseline.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that period of time, do another set of blood tests, because then they can actually compare apples and apples. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I thought about doing a while ago because my health is generally pretty good, but I get low energy, foggy brain, just like a fatigue thing quite often. And I think that's a mental sort of health thing as well. But I think yeah,
Carnivore's great for your mental health. I'll tell you what, mate, for people with depression and does wonders. But you're saying about the mental thing.
Yeah, well, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about as well, and it's probably part of the whole same journey for you. Is you've gone through mental health struggles, addiction, and fitness goals, and this is probably part of what maybe has led you to looking into the carnivore diet and going for it. Like, is it all sort of connected for you?
Well, at the time when I started getting into the carnivore diet, I pretty much kicked any addictions and stuff like that, and most of my mental health stuff was pretty much taken care of. But going on becoming a carnivore certainly helped with things like, I still believe I have some level of ADHD and OCD on things, but less of it. Yeah. And I find that things that used to really get me down, or I would kind of not obsess over, but I would just ruminate on, I'm noticing that I pick up on these things a lot sooner. I'm picking up on the awareness to, what's that about? Oh, okay, cool. I realise what this is, and let it wash over me. But no, you're right. Mental health issues, challenges of the past, and drug addiction. So those two things don't really work well, as you know, and all of that was really self-induced. I was just guilty of my own foibles when it came to all of that. Even though I certainly, even from a young age, I remember being being unhappy as a youngster, not knowing how to navigate the world, and not being comfortable sitting in the feelings. So, I was, medicated with SSRIs from a very young age. And I remember at one stage I was even on Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic drug, lithium, horrible shit.
Poisons.
Yeah, totally. And, when you then add drugs into the mix, it's a terrible cocktail and brings terrible results. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. I mean, we're all going to feel shit, right? We're humans. We're going to have our shit days. But I think that in the world today, and medicine, the way it's taught and the way it's prescribed, is all about the prescription. It's like, take this and come back and see me in 3 months for your refills and repeats and whatnot. I learned that the importance of food, and not just food, but the importance of if not exercise, movement. Let's just say movement, okay? Because people think of exercise as just the gym, but anything that gets you out and moving and stretching, and your stress levels, it's a you got to look at it holistically, right? For these things to improve upon, but food, I think, above anything else, food, because you can't out-train a good diet, no matter how good your training is, how strict your training is, how hardcore your training is, or exercise routine is. If you're going to put shit fuel into your machine, you can have a Ferrari, but if you're just going to try and run it on canola oil, you're going to fuck that engine pretty quick.
Yep. Well, what's that saying? You are what you eat. I mean, it's so true. Simple and cliche, but it's so true.
True. Even Socrates, said, make food thy medicine. And again, it's what I find really interesting is how it's only been in the last 100, 150 years since we've had more and more processed food and ultra-processed food available, that all these diseases have come into the fore. Now, people are going to say, correlation isn't causation, man. Yeah, but I think there's more and more science now that is saying that, the fact of the matter is we are more obese. There's more cancer. There is more diabetes. A lot of the stuff that happens today didn't really exist to the same degree, but again, people were eating cleaner food. People were less sedentary. It was a different time. So, again, logic would dictate that if all those diseases weren't happening at the same rate that they are today, well, what was going on? Well, this is what's going on. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. So perhaps if we start doing more of what people were doing back then, while still, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and so I'm not saying that we need to go back and live just off the land and with hand tools and, all that kind of nonsense. We don't need to go to that extreme. But again, look at what they were eating. Look at their lifestyle. Incorporate more of that into today's modern world, and I'm sure there'll be some benefits there for you.
Yeah, the earth has given us everything we need, but it's like we sort of compromise everything because of financial gains and benefits and corruption and everything. But like I said, that is a huge rabbit hole, but I'm very happy that people are sort of waking up to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think they are. And look, again, I don't want to completely dismiss technology, because there are more people on the planet, and and there are people who are trying to find ways to feed people and do it cheaply, and there is room for innovation, and it is required. And thank goodness that there have been some advancements that have been a benefit, but it's when things get to that real extreme end of artificialness. When the further away we get from nature, the worse off we are.
Yeah.
And that is also, I think that's true in terms of what we put in our mouth, but also in terms of our proximity. We're now, as a species now, we're living in the cities, in little boxes that are stacked. That's not really how we're meant to live.
No.
We're meant to be out in nature, clean air, whether it's in the mountains or by the ocean or by a river or by a lake. But again, anything that's not man-made. Now, I understand that there is the need to house people, and we have these cities, and I'm not that delusional to think that we need to work things out somehow. But even for people that live in those environments, there's something to be said about eating well, getting out, getting to nature as much as you can, connecting with nature as much as you can, eating as cleanly as you possibly can, to be able to function better in that environment.
Yeah, it's got to be a mix, I guess. I mean, some people just want to solely be out in nature and live out on the land, and that's fine. But I think, for our mental health, like I've found getting out into nature, even just for a half an hour walk, being amongst the trees, feeling your feet on the ground.
Getting the earthing.
It just sort of snaps you out of that funk that you could be in, sitting in your room looking at the computer, or being at work amongst all these people and that sort of thing. And I find, and that's sort of my world, and I find, if I go for a walk or, a run, do some weights, that sort of helps me the most. I've obviously tried the alcohol thing and all that sort of stuff, and sometimes, that doesn't hurt, but it's not a permanent solution. Do you find, just going back to the mental health thing, because I was listening to the Daniel Johns podcast they did for him a couple of years ago, I think, and he was sort of saying, it was around 1999, that he was like just really depressed, and he just had to sit there in it himself and try and figure it out, because no one was really talking about it back then, about mental health. Do you sort of think it's a bit different these days, where we openly talk about it a bit more? It's a better thing?
I definitely think it's a better thing now, but we still have a fair way to go. I still believe that there is some level of stigma. While people are encouraged to speak up and share their story in order to give people more courage to speak up for themselves, I still think, and particularly amongst men, because we tend to shut down a bit more, and we still probably, I'm sure there are blokes who still think that it's a sign of weakness to say that. The funny thing about mental health is that if you break your arm and your arm's in a cast, it's like, here it is, I've got a broken arm, right? And you can see it, it's tangible, you get it, there's no question around it, and more importantly, everyone can relate, to it. Where it comes to mental health, because you can't see it, I mean, all you have to do is just say, unless you're showing symptoms of being in real trouble, just the fact of saying, I feel depressed, or I feel anxious, I'm struggling with my thoughts, I had a panic attack. These things cannot be seen or measured as such. And so for, I think, a lot of people, if it's out of sight, it's kind of out of mind. And there's still, I think, a lot of uncertainty around it, and we tend to fear what we don't understand. So Definitely some difference. Definitely things are changing, but we still have a way to go.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we all know someone who suffers from it, whether it's anxiety or mental health, or we are those people ourselves at different times.
1 in 4 people in mainstream and in our world, in the creative artistic world, like 1 in 3. I mean, it's just unacceptable. It is. It's just out of control, man. We feel it more than anyone because we're artists and creatives are just more sensitive creatures, and we feel things more. And I mean, what are drug addicts doing? They're using drugs and substances. Look, could be food, could be other things, anything, whatever it is, to help soothe your pain when something comes up because you haven't resolved, for the most part, it's trauma, childhood trauma that hasn't been resolved. And so things will trigger you, feelings come up, you don't know how to deal with those feelings. And so you're going to resort to something as a mechanism to help quell that pain, that anxiety, that feeling, until, of course, it happens again and it's again and again. So it's not the greatest strategy, but that's pretty much what it is, and why people become addicted to certain things, because they haven't found that way to become resilient and haven't built up the tools to deal with things that'll come their way, the challenges of life, and all that stuff in the past, which they just keep bringing into the present, becomes, it becomes part of their identity, and they become victim to it. And they think, well, there's no, well, this is what happened to me, therefore there's nothing that can be done. And that's the false narrative that people tell themselves. They feel helpless and hopeless. And so they resign themselves to this life of having to use substances. I don't know any drug addict that woke up one day with an aspiration to become a drug addict. And for people that sort of fall into addiction, it was all fun at first. And it was. It was great. I had a great time with it initially. And then, it got to a point where drugs were something I needed to function. You know what I mean? There were people that, they knew that I would party, get up to stuff, but I don't think a lot of people really knew the full extent of my drug abuse, because I wasn't off chops every time they saw me. I would function.
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling good, but I would still function. I was able to present the facade to the world that everything was okay, when it wasn't. Not at all.
Yeah, and I think even though musicians and artists, we're particularly vulnerable, having that outlet, as a creator and creating music is what helps us at the same time. And, me and Carly Jewell were talking about this last night, just having the gift of, being able to create music and pour whatever you're feeling into that. So it's kind of a funny thing, but yeah, I'm absolutely grateful to, even if I just keep the songs to myself, whatever, it's just a good outlet, and I'm very grateful for it, and very grateful for your honesty and for coming on the podcast today, Tony.
Look, you're welcome, man. Look, I've been looking for opportunities just to go out there because I'm doing more speaking, and so thank you for inviting me on to your. Even though I kind of really invited myself, but
not really. I saw the opportunity there and I pounced.
No, I appreciate. I'm grateful that you did, and I appreciate being on here. And hopefully, anyone that has made it this far, thank you. And maybe they got something that is going to make them think about things differently. I know that in my life, when I look back in, my 61 years that I've been living, or for at least the 55 that I can reasonably recall, there were moments, pivotal moments, where someone said something to me that really struck a chord and took me on a different direction, a different trajectory, more often for the better. But it was just something that was said, and hopefully during our podcast here today, Craig, maybe something's been said that by either one of us that someone will attach to and will help shift their thinking a bit, that, creating just enough of a shift to send them off on a different angle. So yeah, look, it was fun. And when you see Carly, give her a big hug for me, and give her my. In fact, I'm going to say now, love you, Carly. You're awesome. Sending you a big hug. But you can be my proxy and give it to her in the 3D physical world when you see her. She's doing really, just very quickly. Isn't she doing well? She's doing so well. She's just such. I admire her. I admire her work ethic and her dedication, and just how she goes for it, man. She's amazing. Because I remember her when she first started out, meeting her at Spike Leo's Sunday sessions that he ran at his studio in Fitzroy at where he's out of right now, in Fitzroy, and she was just so keen, so enthusiastic. She'd listen, and more importantly, you could see she just applied herself. So Kylie gets all my respect, and she's earned it, and she deserves it because she works so hard. So Carly, good on you, darling.
Yep.
Keep at it. And you too, for that matter, Craig.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we saw each other the other night because we played together at the Hawthorne Hotel, because I'm playing guitar for Amy Francis, another legend.
Amy's yeah. What a story she is. And again, I remember Amy when she first started, and again, just watching her progress and grow, and who she's become as an artist, as a young woman. It's incredible story. Yeah. Lots of love and respect for her as well.
Yeah, we played together the other night, and I was just sort of talking about it with Carly last night. Part of the reason I started this podcast is, I wanted to get to know my fellow musicians a lot better, and a lot of the time, you're just sort of passing hellos at gigs and that sort of thing, because you're doing your own thing, and you don't really get time to sort of delve into proper conversations. And Carly and I didn't get to chat the other night really at all. It was just hello and see ya, and that was it. And then, that's sort of why I invited her to come on the podcast last night and have a proper chat, because we didn't get to actually chat in person. So, that was sort of one of my main ideas behind this podcast, which has been really good, and obviously to connect with people like yourself, it's been really good for that. But I will pass on those hugs for you in real life.
Please do. Yeah.
And just want to thank you again for. Cheers.
Yeah, and look, you're welcome, and good on you for doing this podcast. At least you've been able to keep it up, unlike me. Or, I started a podcast, but maybe next year we'll reboot something. But no, I think that the world wants more this long-form conversation rather than sound bites, even though I know that reels online are popular because of people's attention span. But there's something to be said about long-form conversation, especially when it comes to the person being someone of interest to a listener and on subject matter that they're interested in, because it becomes more of a deep dive into things, a greater exploration. And I believe that more of them are needed and required, and good on you for taking the initiative to do it, my friend.
Yeah, well, we're all on this planet together, so, sometimes hearing two other people talk about something makes that one person feel like, oh, hey, that's sort of what I'm going through, and it just helps a little bit, and it's good if we can talk things out. So yeah, thank you again for coming on today, and thank you for all your honesty, Tony. Before we go, where can people find you in case they want to follow you?
I'm responsive on Facebook. It's Tony Jack Mantz on Facebook. I can't take any more friends, but you can still interact with me there. You can hit me up on Messenger. Instagram is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. For those of you who are interested more in the mastering side of things, I'm at jackthebear.com.au, and I'm just about to launch a new website, but people can go check it out, which is more the speaking mentoring side of things, which is tonymantz.com. So if you want to link it all, people can go check it out.
Yep. I'll put all the links in the show notes. So, thanks, Tony. Really appreciate you coming on today. And
pleasure. Good talking with you, Craig. Thank you.
Too. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll catch you again soon for another episode of Foxx on the Wire. Cheers.